Yeah, with baseball season here, I admire that so many women could get their husbands out of the house tonight. Congress coming up with a new law, and it's pretty practical too. That it's something. Anytime a husband watches more than 3 ball games back to back, his wife can have him declared legally dead. But in my case, it's the other way. My wife is the one. And not so bad in the normal season, but boy, in the World Series, forget it. You can't get any sense out of her at all. I woke her up one morning, honey, I said it's 10-7. She said, whose favor? Working in the woods one time, and I was working underneath a bulldozer, and my brother was over in the pickup. We had a radio in it. And he would listen to a ball game, or it was on anyway. And he came over and I said, what's the score? He says, it's 9-12. I said, who's winning? He'd gone quite a while. Pretty soon he come back. He says, 12. My golly, traveling with my boy has been a treat. I tell you, this is going to be a lonesome. Yeah, it's nice, the young. We really have time to talk, and Matthew, this boy's with me. He's a neat kid. We have 2 boys. We don't talk much about Michael. We should have quit while we were ahead. I knew that. I will never know why we had Michael. It seemed like a good idea at the time, but you know what they call a man that doesn't believe in birth control? Daddy. Well, he's all right. A funny little, mean little kid. He gave the wrong direction to an ambulance one time. And he'll argue the time of day with you. Michael will just argue. I told him one time, honey, I said, you got your hat on backwards. Oh, yeah, he said, how you know which way I'm going to walk? We didn't argue with our dad, me and Bones didn't. Oh, you argue with my dad, you'd wake up 30 yards away on your hind end. But he argued all done and doggone, I don't know. I gave him a BB gun for Christmas. He gave me a T-shirt with a bullseye on it. Had a letter from his teacher. She said, Michael will probably never grow up to become president, but with his record for absenteeism, he should do well in the Senate. Dennis lectures. My brother does lecture. He lectures. I was in Detroit one time for George, and I got to thinking about my brother because we'd been in all kinds of businesses together. Everything we ever done, we'd gone broke. But now I found myself in this business, and I'm doing pretty well, So I got thinking I didn't know what old Bones was doing, but I knew whatever he was doing, it was going broke. I'm pretty sure of that. So I called him up on the phone, and I got him. They just had phones put in Dvorak on the homestead. Had a terrible time getting him, and they finally went through the long-distance people, and finally I heard him answer the phone, and the operator said, long distance from Detroit. And my brother said, yep. It sure is. And hung up. Went through the whole thing. He never did get the phone straight in his head. He hadn't today. He got his finger stuck in the dial the other day, and he called half the people in western Montana before he got out of it. And they put it in. He didn't know where he wanted it. So they put a lot of cord on it, so he'd have a choice. And he called up Missoula a while back. That's the phone people. Doggone, I hope he didn't give me his last name. He said, would you please pull some of this cord in on your end? So finally I got hold of him, and I said, why don't you do what I'm doing? I said, you make a film, I'll make another print. And some of you have been to his shows, I'm sure. same show. But he said, I'll do it. He said, well, I'd like to travel with you a week. First, he'd never been to one, and I happened a week later, I was in Chicago, and he came back to Chicago and traveled a week with me. And first night, I was in a place called Winnetka. It was north, somewhere up on the lake somewhere. And we went up on the train, and we did the show, and afterward we had a little get-together. And after that, we came back on the subway. First time he'd been east of Montana, first time he'd seen a subway. And then that's when they just had they had an escalator, and we got off down wherever you get on. And then there was the escalator, and my brother went over to the escalator, first time he'd ever seen one of those. And there was a sign on the escalator, and the sign said, "Dogs must be carried on escalator." So he read the sign. Son of a gun, he said, "Where are we going to find a dog this time?" Listen. Yeah, well, he lectures, but he has an awful time. He and I used to log in Alaska. One time we come back from Alaska, we landed in Seattle, and we got a cab to take us down to the old Milwaukee train to go back to Montana. And on the way into town, the cab driver said, "Would you guys like to hear a riddle?" And my brother said, "Yes." He said, "I'm good at riddles." So the cab driver told us, it's a dumb riddle, but it's part of our story. He said, "My mother had a baby, and the baby was not my brother, and the baby was not my sister." He said, "Who was it?" So Dennis thought for about 15 miles. Finally, he gave up. He said, "I give up." He said, "Who was it?" The cab driver said, "It was me." "Oh," Dennis said, he punched me in the arm. He said, "It was a cab driver." "Yeah," I said, "I heard, that's pretty good." So we got home, and a couple days later, he invited his friends up, kind of a homecoming party. And they're all sitting around, and his friends have all got an IQ about equal to a grapefruit, too, So he said, "Would you folks like to hear a riddle?" I darn near fell off the seat. I knew he was going to blow that sucker. I didn't know how, but I knew he would find a way. Because to tell a story, you got to keep a couple thoughts at the same time. We're talking about a guy that can't chew gum and walk, for crying out loud. So they did, and so he told them the riddle, dumb riddle. My mother had a baby, it wasn't my sister, it wasn't my brother, who was it? And they all thought, and they all gave up. After a while, they said, "Who was it?" He said it was a cab driver. You ought to turn out the light. Yeah, we got to film it. Incidentally, somebody asked me about the tapes. The tapes are as long as the show. The front talk is filmed, the middle talk, the whole 9 yards, an hour and 40. We just filmed a live show, as indeed we are doing tonight, right here in Macomb, and hopefully this will be a result on a video. Well, anyway, we're on top of the Rocky Mountains now, and we're going north on the trail, the Old West Trail, right? And where these waters we'll see now flow off down to the Pacific Ocean. See, the Rockies, the snow that melts on the top of these Rockies creates these rivers, and they flow to different oceans. And because these mountains divide the waters of our continent, we often call these mountains the Continental Divide. Good fishing, that's all I say. I know a lot of speakers come here and exaggerate and tell corny jokes, practices I personally find very odious. I just say good fishing. It was good fishing. You had to hide behind a tree to bait the hook. I never saw nothing like that. That's how we spell relief. Now the Old West Trail becomes part of the Coulter Trail. John Coulter, early mountain man, and Coulter's Trail went north through Yellowstone National Park, an Old Faithful geyser, Morning Glory Pool, and then it entered Montana here just a little east of central Montana. Now Montana, my grandpa come out of Kentucky, folks, because he said it was too mountainous to farm. He was looking for farmland. And the old nut, he crossed Iowa. I mean, anybody looking for farmland crosses Iowa. He ain't got both oars in the water either, And here's where he settled. He had an eye for beauty, but here's where we live. And the reason I like a motorhome are many reasons, but one reason, but you're always home, you know. I mean, you just stop up here in the mountains and have lunch on the patio or dinner. Now, it's kind of, my brother called this a one-person patio. And it means if you put two people on it, the sucker dumps you over the edge. But that's where we would have. And the mountains you see, I thought I had the homestead here, but maybe I do. At any rate, are the Rockies, and at least in my own case, can very honestly be called the hills of home. And this is part of our homestead, and we logged this very area. It doesn't look bad, does it? See all the timber that was left? See, when we logged it, and this is just a reenactment, we don't fall with a crosscut anymore, but me and Bones fell with a crosscut. I went to work full time in the logging camps when I was 13. It did interfere with my education, all right, but anyway, what I was going to say, even then, Dad took and hired the Forest Service man, a forester, to come out, and he went through with an axe and marked the trees you should take. And that's the only one you took, the old mature trees. It's called selective yield, you know, or perpetual yield. It's the way Norway and Sweden have logged. We don't do it anymore. We've gotten in an awful hurry now, and we're clear cutting, and they have lots of reasons why they clear cut. Folks, they don't believe the reasons themselves. They clear cut because it's terribly efficient. And it does. You make a lot of money more quickly. But it shows no compassion for a subsequent generation and their need for timber. In the old days, if you fell a tree that you were supposed to leave stand, you had to go out on your own time and stand that son of a gun back up. Yeah, I worked a long time. Oh, Dad put me in the working in the woods. I don't know, he didn't. I wasn't a good student. That seems incredible now, but spelling was terrible. Wow. We had a spelling bee one day. I spelled weather with 4 E's. I did. Teacher said it was the worst spell of weather she'd ever seen. You wear hard hats on your head and cork boots on your feet. The hard hat is kind of tongue-in-cheek. We do it to satisfy the government. But really, if you get hit with a tree that size, the hat ain't no big deal. Drive you in the ground like a tent peg. Loggers go to town, they go to a loggeroo, and everybody goes swimming. I mean, everybody, even the winners lose. And since this women's liberation movement, they're involved and very good at it. It's a much more interesting movement, and I believe I'm in favor of this, son of a gun. Could boy, that girl, especially after 2 months in a logger, every time I look at her, my socks would roll up and down. Well, bad news to those of us that live in the Rocky Mountains is smoke coming over a ranch. You know, I think every part of the world has some kind of a nemesis. You know, some have floods or earthquakes or typhoons or hurricanes or fires. And fires are started partly by people, partly by lightning. But after a bad lightning storm in dry summer weather, what we call fire season, they'll send out a spotter plane over the affected area, and if he sees the smoke, the plane will radio Missoula for the area we're talking about here, Missoula. And the Missoula has these World War II type bombers on standby. And within 30 minutes of the time they get the location of the fire, they can load up with a fire retardant called borate and be on what they call a drop out in the fire side. And many of these places have no roads or trails. I mean, you'd be hours and hours getting men in there. And even when the men get there, it's, not all that. There's more to putting the fire out than just getting to it. And it does help. It slows them down. What we try to do with the borate is surround them, keep them small. And then they get away now, and then this one got away. Dennis and I fought this one, 6,000 acres on fire. But we didn't volunteer for it. You don't have to. They come right to your house and volunteer for you. They're very, very upfront about it. I fought this fire, but I still got slivers under my fingernails where they drugged me off the back porch, too. And one thing I should mention, a lot of campgrounds would not let us in. They said we were not self-contained. We didn't even know what they're talking about. And then a guy told us. So then we got some lumber and some more nails. We do have a crop in Montana. Timber's a crop, and we raise trees. And you raise them in tree farms, folks. And just like you'd raise any other crop, you start out with tree seeds. And the seeds, well, we get the seeds from the cones, the cones from the trees. And in the fall of the year, Ruth and I and the boys, Matthew and Michael, used to go out on picnics, and they'd take along some gunny sacks and gather cones. And they'd sell these cones, the boys would, to the tree farmers, and they make a few dollars. And the farmer takes and puts the seeds into trays and wheels them into a dry kiln, an oven, and the heat of the oven opens the cone and releases somewhat its grasp upon the seed, making the seed more easily extracted in that portion of the institution you see, which we call an expectorant. A cone is a pretty sophisticated item. A cone is so designed that heat will open it up, and the exact same amount of warm spring sunshine that warms the earth to the optimum temperature for accepting the seed, that same exact amount of warm spring sunshine opens the cone and drops the seed onto the ready and waiting earth at the most opportune moment for survival. Now the cones come from different types of trees, so they're tagged and tagged as to type and origin, and the tag says DF, Douglas Fir, Connexu Forest, 3,000 feet altitude, area 660. Now these seeds will be planted, and when the seedling therefrom are 3 years old, these trees will go back and be planted in the Connexu Forest at 3,000 feet altitude in area 660. So that, in effect, the trees are simply going home. 2 methods of planting. A drill seeder plants them and covers them with sand, all in one operation, to keep the birds and the seeds and the wind from blowing them away. This plants them far enough apart that trees can grow for the required 3 years without being moved. In other words, they go back to the forest from their original planting bed. The other method of planting, however, is called broadcast or shotgun. This method. Now, the good news here is you start a lot more trees in the same amount of soil. The bad news is when they're 1 year old, they crowd, and you have to transplant the seedbed. Each little tree, 1 year old Douglas fir, and you have to plant them in another seedbed here for the 2 additional years. Kind of an interesting machine. It's built over here in Holland. I noticed that on the tag, Holland, Michigan. Yeah. It takes 2 people ride on it, self-propelled. They put the tree behind the clip. Wheel takes it down, digs a hole, puts the tree, tamps the soil gently around it, and as it passes on by, it leaves a little miniature forest there. You know, the incredible thing, if you want to really analyze it, some of these trees are no bigger than a kitchen match. In the case of the Douglas fir, they can get to be 180 feet high and 14 foot in diameter on the base. They found Douglas fir bigger than that. I mean, to me, that's really a miracle. Well, we can build a tower higher than that, but, well, we can, all right, but we can't put life. We can't put life in a little old crying-eyed blade of grass. I live in a little town called Dvorak. It was all burned in a terrible fire in 1910. The smoke was bad in Chicago from the 10 fire. All of this was burned. It's all been planted by man. Oh, there's the meadow. That's the upper homestead where we have spent our lives and where the boys are growing up. And this is boy, it's a nice feeling to be socially acceptable. And a big factor is a big advantage was when the old truck broke down and you had to send away for parts. We already had the old Sears and Roebuck catalog right there. The auto parts were the last pages we used. Great year for huckleberries. I can lean out the window. We're in the Western Rockies, Montana. Pick huckleberries by the handful or the bowlful, put them on hot cakes and smash them. There ain't no bad way to eat a huckleberry. My mom used to make huckleberry pie. Some things from childhood you never forget. I can taste them yet today. Oh, they smelled. We'd know when to come home from school when we were half a mile down the trail. And my brother makes it, and you know when he's making them too. It's enough to gag a skunk. I don't know what he does. Ain't that a mess? If the Donner Party had had all my brothers cooking they could eat, they would have still eaten each other. We raised a lot of cherries too. You know something about fog? Many mornings it'll be foggy in the valley. But if you go up and up and up through fog, you come out in a really beautiful, sunshiny world above the fog. Doggone, it's a nice feeling to come out of the fog up there. And you look down, and the fog lays like great white rivers running down the valleys of the mountain west. And many a morning we'd come above the fog in the early morning, cook breakfast and eat it here, so we could watch the fog dissipate. I just love this time of day. And we climbed a long mountain. We're almost to the top when the engine died, and back down the mountain that sucker came. Oh, they got no brakes in reverse with a hoot. And my brother's scared silly, and he yelled, "Help, help." And if I'd have been in the truck, I'd have helped him. But boy, I was in no... In 1855, I think it was, yes, the government commissioned an army captain, Captain John Mullen, to build a wagon road. And you kind of got to picture this in your mind. It had a very definite purpose. The wagon road was to connect the head of navigation on the Missouri River at Fort Benton, Montana, with the head of navigation on the Columbia River, that's west of the Rockies, at Walla Walla, Washington. There was a 600-mile stretch through the Rockies where there were no navigable waters. See, you could go all the way almost from the Atlantic coast, from Pittsburgh on the Monongahela and the Allegheny. You could go down the Ohio to the Mississippi, up the Mississippi to the Missouri, and all the way almost to the Rockies on the Missouri. But then there were the Rockies, and that's where he surveyed his road. He surveyed it climbing a tree, had a pad and a pencil. He drew his survey and he built his road. Well, they are rebuilding his road right now. Interstate 90 is, Interstate 90 is 90 goes right through western Montana. The tribute to Mullen is even though they are rebuilding his road, they're using his survey. Even though they have surveyed it from the air and from the ground and millions of dollars and pictures of every square foot, they find that he found the best way to go through 600 miles of rugged terrain. But what a difference in the way they build a road. This is not even the road builder. This is a clearing contractor, different guy altogether. And this used to be a big deal for the local people, clearing the right-of-way for the road. You know, saws, axes, brush hooks, work we understood. Boy, did we get the air let out of our balloon when this guy came. He brought his whole crew. Only 2 men, that's a whole crew. One each had a bulldozer. One sat on the ridge and held on to his partner with a big cable. The other guy lowered a blade and cleared a 16-foot swath to the bottom, about 30 minutes. Yeah, I mean, you wonder why we have unemployment. Well, holy Toledo, and one day last summer, the cable broke, and his partner cleared a 16-foot swath halfway to South Dakota. Well, now the Old West Trail gets into Canada and becomes the Thompson Trail. Thompson Trail, named after David Thompson, a young Canadian explorer and cartographer. Thompson made the first maps of Western Canada, and his trails travel through some of the prettiest mountain scenery in the world, the Canadian Rocky Mountains. And as it's getting later in the summer, into the fall now, and also we're going north. So each day the color brightens and deepens. We don't have the reds they have in the eastern states, but you have, I guess, more maple, whatever gives you the red. But we have lots of golds. The cottonwood and the poplar and the birch and the aspen. So they grow along the river, particularly the cottonwood. So you just have ribbons of gold winding through the mountains. And we did paint our truck because we like to look good so people will be happy when they're... See, we travel late at night. When we come into a town, we always seek out the finest residential area and camp there. And that's the reason we knock ourselves out looking good. When the people that live there look out the window in the morning and see us, we like to feel they get on the phone and call their neighbors and say, "My, how lucky we are. There's a new family, and we hope they'll be with us a long time. And that's the reason. And we didn't even know we had this talent. I bet a lot of people go through life with talents they don't even know they have. You know? Well, it was fall, all right. One sign of fall out home is the tamarack turn color. Tamarack is a needle tree. It's a deciduous needle tree. There are only 3 in the world. The tamarack that you're looking at, the cypress, and the juniper they have in China, I'm told. And they mingle with the evergreen, so in the fall you have great green and gold carpets across the Rockies and in the valleys. And in the fall we drain the radiator. Now, the younger generation, including my kids, think I'm just telling another one, you know, but we did drain the radiator. Some of you remember in cold nights, right? Doggone right, we drain in that tub every night. And then we put it over the breakfast fire and use, you know, whatever we need for coffee or whatever we're needed. And then we started getting into the middle of the Canadian Rockies, going into the winter and snow. And I told Dennis, I said, let's turn around and get the heck out of here. Sure as shooting, I said, we're going to snow in again. Because we did a couple times in our life. No, he said, but winter is one of the things he'd majored in school. And he said there won't be any snow till after Christmas. It's the 3rd day of November we were here. There is no snow, but there's a heavy frost. Well, no snow, the big fat head. 11 years, we're still paying off the mortgage on the homestead to come up with a conclusion like that. Crying out loud, I shouldn't even kid him, he's not feeling well. He chewed so many toothpicks, he got Dutch elm disease a while back. We went into that 5 days we went, and one day it started snowing right when we were eating supper. Snowed all night. It put 30 inches of new snow on top of 40 inches of old snow, and nothing with wheels went over that road for 5 months. In next May, a logging company sent a bulldozer and plowed it. So we were winter bound, so we shoveled a road about 100 yards to the creek. There's where we wintered. And all night we'd hear this little creek talking to you. That's nice at night. You know, at midnight, you're not as brave as you are at high noon. Nice in the dark to hear a voice. Good drinking water, good fishing. Many a morning I'd pull the breakfast water in, look in the bucket, 2 or 3 fine trout. One morning a can of salmon, that even amazed me. We're not alone. We're not alone. We had neighbors. Our closest neighbors lived just across the creek. A man and his wife, or a ptarmigan and his mate, I guess. The willow ptarmigan in their winter clothes. And their winter shoes. See that when the Lord sends the snow down, he sends them all a pair of snowshoes. See their feet? Yeah, they walk on the snow just no problem. And me and Bones used to snowshoe maybe once or twice a week to the head of the canyon. And we'd go up, and about a half a mile up the canyon, there was a meadow. And every morning we'd see white-tailed deer in this meadow. And the morning before this, we went up and we counted 27 whitetail right here. So this morning I took the camera. And this morning, 25 of them slept in. Farther up in his own area was a bull elk. Big bull elk wintered there. Beautiful animal in the lodgepole. And all along the creek, the ptarmigan. Now notice he's not only white. He's snow white. Nature does that to give him kind of a leg up on the world. That way, their friend the lynx won't see them as readily. The lynx was the biggest predator in this valley. And the lynx lived in the valley because there was a lot of ptarmigan and a lot of snowshoe rabbits. See his big hind feet? Yeah, for walking on snow. Technically, his name is varying hare because his colors vary with the colors of the seasons. One of the prettiest of the cat family, the Canada lynx, big golden-eyed cat. Now we come to the head wall, and now we're going very steep. And as we get higher, it gets colder. Now it's cold enough, so the water steams. See the steam? See, folks, cold water will steam if the air is colder than the water. Purely a relative thing. Now we come to timberline, and then there's about 200 yards, and then there's the ridge. But this is as far as the timber goes. And right here was a great spruce thicket, and in that thicket wintered a Rocky Mountain sheep, a mother, a ewe, and a spring lamb. They had a nice spot to winter. Thick boughs kept the storm and the wind away. And then on nice days, she'd take the lamb and go up above the thicket, scrape the snow off the rock as you saw her, and eat the lichens, the mosses that grew there. Me and Bones didn't both stay here all winter, though. We got a terrible case of cabin fever. Holy toly. I would. What a grouch. I'd rather winter with a grizzly bear. I went 3 weeks. I never said nothing. One morning I forgot. I said, good morning. Boy, did he blow up. Oh, wow. He says, you going to continually yap your mouth off all winter? The first cotton-picking thing I'd said in 3 weeks. I'm glad when spring came, the flowers jump out of the snow, and a family of robins flew north and nested right outside our window. And one day the old man gave such a big beetle it almost choked the kid. And the mother yarded the beetle out of the kid and bawled the old man out, and he yelled at her, oh. Finally, he got so mad, he said, I'm going to feed this beetle to that kid if it's the last thing I do. And he did. Spring eventually sprang. Notice our ptarmigan, same pair, they have 5 little ones now. Now, notice the female, she's changed already. Notice how she blends with the foreground. The female, the one behind. The male still has a little white on him. The white on the tummy is the last to go. Their back turns dark first when the snow lifts, because most of their danger is in the air. The eagle, the owl, and the hawk. Yeah. Well, Dennis and I start on north on the Thompson Trail, once again towards Alaska. And we stopped here, we did a little spring cleaning, because we had running water. Boy, I mean, we had running water. You put a bucket in there, you want to have a pretty good hold of the tree with the other hand, or you're just part of the creek. Yeah, well, they call me Mr. Clean in the logging camps. I knocked myself out. You know, one of the problems with this trail, and no disrespect for David Thompson, a great explorer, but his trail was going down a lot of hills that we will never get back up with this gutless wonder. And that leads you to the conclusion that, you know, I mean, you got to go out the other end, right? I mean, if you can't turn around and go back, there's only one direction, and that's forward. And forward, I wasn't so sure about, because every day it got worse. I mean, water had eroded the road, and trees were across it. And this morning we hadn't gone a mile, and we'd been 2 hours. That's the morning we heard a terrible roar. We heard a roar that'd scare you out of 30 years ago. I mean, unlike anything I'd ever heard in the wilderness. Holy Toledo, I didn't know what man. About the time the 84th car went by, my brother looked at me. He said, there's a railroad train there. Mined like a steel trap. He said, if it's about as wide as our wheels, about as wide as theirs, we might as well use the tracks when the train ain't, so we will. Dennis said not to worry. He said one of the things he majored in college was on the train. Nice thing about going through the Canadian Rockies by rail. The animals are so accustomed to the train they don't even look up. I will say this, if they looked up and got one shot of us, we had their undivided attention. He couldn't believe. What the daylight is that? We filmed the big bull elk. Did you know, I guess most of you here would, that an elk loses his antlers every winter, grows a brand new set every summer, and it takes a lot of food for all that rapid bone growth. And the food is carried out in the blood, contained in the blood vessels that are contained in a velvety hide that cover the antler then. Well, after the antlers are big enough, they don't need any more food, so the hide falls off, and out west we sometimes call that losing the velvet. found those lambs. My brother's good at finding stuff. Sometimes he finds things before the owners even realize they lost it. Now the snow that falls here in the top of the northern Rockies melts and creates rivers that run to different oceans. And some of these little streams, in their great haste to reach the Pacific Ocean, leap over cliffs as much as 1,200 feet high. David Thompson came in here, and David Thompson made a trail, and others followed it, and others came here with dreams. Have you ever gone by kind of what you're seeing now, an old barn or a house in a barn? I mean, it's nothing now, but someday at one time, that was somebody's dream. An awfully lot of work goes into it. We did not ask permission of the railroad company to use their railroad tracks because we thought if we asked, they would undoubtedly not let us do it. And then we thought that we would undoubtedly go ahead and do it anyway. And then we thought, too, that if they caught us, which they undoubtedly would, that they would be just twice as mad as if we hadn't said nothing about it in the first place. My brother told me that. He majored. My dad told me the same thing in fewer words. He said it's easier to get forgiveness than it is permission. We came to Edmonton now, and there we got off the tracks, partly at the suggestion of the local railroad officials, a singularly humorless lot. And now we get on. At one time, this was a trail that took the gold seekers from Edmonton, Canada, to the Klondike gold fields in the Yukon. They called it the Edmonton Trail. Then in the war, World War II, they needed a road. So they built the Alaskan Highway, a lot of it over the Edmonton Trail. And when you get into Alaska, you get to the land of the parka squirrel. They call them parkies. And parkies, too, is a great trail dish. I'm going to give you the recipe. You take a little salt. Well, first you take a parka squirrel. That's the number one ingredient. And a hard little rascal catching them ain't no piece of cake because we don't have a gun or a trap or nothing. In order to catch them, we had to outwit them. My brother matched wits with him first. My brother got caught 3 times. Then I took over and I built a diabolically clever trap. Now a little salt, not too much salt, folks, just a touch. I've been telling you for years, my brother's hotcakes were for the birds, so here you are. Canada Jay, they call him, or we call him in the camps, the camp brother. Makes a great bowl of soup. I had one right in my hot little hand. If I'd had my head screwed on straight, I'd have souped that son of a gun. But there was another one just like him in a nearby bush. I thought I'll wait till when the bush will come over, 2 bowls of soup. And while I waited, the one I had in my hand flew away. I couldn't. I've been telling you for years, my brother's hotcakes were for the birds, so here you are. Canada Jay, they call him, or we call him in the camps, the camp brother. Makes a great bowl of soup. I had one right in my hot little hand. If I'd had my head screwed on straight, I'd have souped that son of a gun. But there was another one just like him in a nearby bush. I thought I'll wait till when the bush will come over, 2 bowls of soup. And while I waited, the one I had in my hand flew away. I could not believe. And from that weird experience, I came up with a wise saying, used extensively by the intelligentsia: a rolling stone. My God, that can't be right. Now we're on the last of our trails, the Denali Trail, the Indians call it. Took them to their great mountain that they call Denali. We call McKinley. Talk about a mountain world. Look at the mountains in back of this beautiful bull caribou. He's coming over to check us out. We're not hiding. There's no place to hide. We're just standing. Came within about 70 feet maybe. Turned around and walked away. All that day we went up the Denali Trail, and across the creek was a mother bear, a toe-clap grizzly, and a spring cubs, 2 of them. And she's trying to teach them how to live in this big, incredible world that they'll call home, and they could care less. They're chasing each other and eating the flowers and fighting butterflies. And now she's digging out a parka squirrel. Parka squirrels know the bear can outdig them, so they have several exits. And the bears know the parka squirrels have several exits. You see her, she'll dig, and then she'll look. It's like a pitcher trying to hold a runner on first. I mean, she's checking, and she saw him make a go for it. And if you don't think a 700-pound grizzly bear can run a broken field, don't ever check your theory with a live bear. It'll be a very terminal experience. And that night, then, we camped, and they camped nearby. And the next morning, she could not find the cubs. And she thought me and Bones had a hand in this. It was a very low point of the day for us. She came over this ridge, but there's a little valley, and she got in the valley, there was a little lake, and she found the cubs, which accounts for the presence of your speaker here tonight. I'm happiest I've ever been to see a family reunited. These are Dall sheep, the great Dall ram, the white ram of the north, but chasing them is a little animal that you here in Michigan should surely recognize. There's Mr. Blood and Guts, honestly, pound for pound, the toughest living thing on earth, the wolverine. And here's a confrontation. Eventually there were 12 full curl Dall rams, and eventually there were 3 wolverine too. In a lifetime in the wilderness, I'd previously seen 1 wolverine. Before this day was over, I saw 3, as well as a ram. Both are quite rare, these animals. But here, now you look closely, it's a short shot, but there are 3 of them. That's nice. I like to know they're there. I may never see them again, but it's just comforting to know they're there. I like that. You see, as time goes by, people move out. Well, the wild animals move back. They've always done that. I guess it was all right years ago. There was a back to move into, but many are on the edge now or near the edge. I mean, we have to, somewhere along the line, realize that our expertise in technology has given us an incredible advantage over the wild kingdom. There was a time when conquering the wilderness said with great pride and justifiably, but the time is gone, folks. Wilderness is conquered. We either treat it with compassion or we lose it. Caribou going south and the wolves follow. Big one almost came into camp. Pretty animal, wasn't it? Wolves. And then a couple days later, we saw a small band of caribou running. We knew something was after him, and a few minutes later, a wolf came along. He's not trying to catch them, and they're not running very fast either. The wolf knows that he cannot alone catch a caribou. Caribou can outrun him, outwind him. So, the one that finds him starts and follows him, just trotting, and every few minutes they stop and let out a blood-curdling howl. Way down the valley, a wolf howls back. They're forming a pack, and when they had 10 wolves, I counted 10 wolves at one point. When they had 10, they made a deadly ploy. They stationed 5 at one end of the canyon, 5 at the other, about 2.5, 3 miles apart, and now these wolves chase them back and forth. This wolf has given it all he's got. He knows he won't catch him either. His idea is to make them run as fast as they can run. Each time they went past, twice each way, 4 times they went by Dennis and I. Each time, it was a different, fresh wolf. But it's the same caribou. And the weaker ones fall back, and they are the first to die. And that's part of nature's plan. We have a new science called eugenics. Eugenics tells us that stronger parentage creates stronger offspring. Nature practices it, determined to keep the species strong, often at great cost to the individual. They went right by a mother moose and a baby. She had the little guy in the pond as far as she could get him. They might have got him, but they would have paid a terrible price. A mother moose is a horrendous opponent. The howl of a wolf back on the chase is a terrible sound, but the howl of a lone wolf is a sad, even a lonesome sound. Well, folks, this is Mount McKinley. Looks like the clouds, it's so white. Highest point in North America. The Indians named it Denali. They were pagan. Their god of storm was named Denali. They thought he lived there and created the storms. And sometimes it seems it, because it'll cloud up right where you're looking at it. They do not call it McKinley National Park anymore. They call it Denali National Park. But they still call this great mountain Mount McKinley. The sun comes up about 1 in the morning and paints that great mountain what they sometimes call the Alpine Blue. Well, the white man's been in these western mountains now for 400 years. He's widened the trails of the Mountain West. He's taken out some of the treasure, the timber, the fur, the minerals. It's only in recent years we've found the greatest treasure the mountains have to offer the people is simply the fun of going there. And they go and they float down a river in a rubber raft. Or if they're more involved with excitement, they float down a more exciting river. Or if you want, you have the time, you can take and steam through the Rocky Mountains on an old steam train. All kinds of things to do with the Rocky Mountains. Or you can steam through the Rockies in an old steamboat. You want to have lots of time for that. If you really want to whip through them, steam through them in a steam truck. And that's the beautiful thing about the Rockies. I mean, all of these things are free. Or you can go swimming, or you can go skiing, or you can go both. And another nice thing, the same mountains at different times of the year have a totally new wardrobe. In the fall, they all turn gold. In winter, they all turn white. Go in the spring, when the high alpine meadows are just getting the flowers that you've had down here in May. They'll get them up there in early July. Whole meadows like the glacier lily. But the wonderful thing about this is when the people leave and go home, all they take away are memories. And maybe they go home with a little better, truer idea of our own perspective, of our own importance. We live in a world increasingly civilized. We see more and more of the things created by man, fewer and fewer the things created by God. And sometimes we get to thinking man is a great creator. But the mountains often tell us in their own quiet way that they were here a long time before we came. And they'll likely be here a long time after we're all gone. As I remember you for many years, delightful audience, God bless you all, and good night.